The lecture hall buzzed with the usual mix of nervous energy and academic boredom that came with advanced xenobiology. Professor Kelthorne's four arms gestured gracefully as he explained the reproductive cycles of Venusian cloud dwellers to a class of mixed-species students. The Altarians took meticulous notes with their tentacles, while the crystalline Zephyrians recorded everything through their natural frequency modulators. In the third row, Maya Chen sat with her chin propped on her hand, trying not to fall asleep. Earth had only joined the Galactic Academic Coalition 3 years ago, and humans were still considered the new kids on the block. Most of her classmates treated her like an exotic pet or a dangerous curiosity. She couldn't decide which was worse. "Now, class," Professor Kelthorne continued, his voice carrying the melodic tones typical of his species. "Who can tell me why certain species develop symbiotic relationships with their planetary ecosystems?" A few hands shot up. "Well, hands and tentacles and crystalline appendages." Maya kept hers down. She'd learned early that human perspectives on biology often made her classmates uncomfortable. Something about coming from a Deathworld apparently gave her ideas that were too violent for polite academic discussion. "Miss Zixandra," the professor pointed to a graceful Altarian whose skin shimmered with pleased phosphorescence. "Symbiotic relationships develop when both organisms can benefit without causing harm to either party," she said in her liquid voice. "It's the foundation of all civilized biological interaction." "Excellent. And why is this principle so important in galactic society?" Another student, this one from Kepler 442b, raised a scaly hand. "Because it proves that evolution naturally tends toward cooperation and peace. Violence is an aberration that only occurs in underdeveloped ecosystems." Maya couldn't help herself. A snort of laughter escaped before she could stop it. Every head in the room turned toward her, and she felt the familiar weight of alien attention. Professor Kelthorne's large, compound eyes focused on her with what she'd learned to recognize as barely concealed disapproval. "Miss Chen, do you have something to contribute to our discussion?" Maya glanced around the room at the expectant faces. Most looked curious, but she caught the usual undertones of nervousness that her presence always seemed to generate. The Altarians' phosphorescence had shifted to wary yellow, and the Zephyrians were humming in frequencies she'd learned indicated discomfort. "That symbiosis isn't always peaceful," she said carefully. "Sometimes the most successful partnerships come from organisms that started as predators and prey." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Professor Kelthorne's skin shifted to a deeper shade of blue, which Maya had learned meant irritation among his people. "Miss Chen, while I appreciate your unique perspective, I think you'll find that such primitive viewpoints don't apply to advanced biological systems. The violence inherent in your homeworld's ecosystem is an unfortunate anomaly." "Primitive?" Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Earth's biodiversity index is higher than 90% of cataloged worlds. Our ecosystems are incredibly sophisticated. Sophisticated in their brutality, perhaps." The comment came from Vextai, a Rigelian whose people were known for their philosophical nature. His tone carried the condescending patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a child. "Your world's reputation precedes it, Miss Chen. Deathworld isn't just a classification. It's a warning." Maya stood up slowly. Around her, several students shifted nervously in their seats. She'd grown used to this reaction. At 5'6", she wasn't particularly tall by human standards, but apparently she towered over most galactic species. More importantly, she moved in a way that set off every prey instinct her classmates possessed. "You want to know about Earth's ecosystems?" she asked, her voice remaining calm despite the anger building in her chest. "Let me tell you about the relationship between cleaner fish and sharks." "Miss Chen, I hardly think..." Professor Kelthorne began. The shark could eat the cleaner fish any time it wanted, Maya continued, ignoring the interruption. It's a perfect killing machine, one of the most efficient predators in Earth's oceans, but instead, it lets tiny fish swim right into its mouth to clean its teeth. The fish get food, the shark gets dental care. Perfect symbiosis. That's actually quite fascinating, admitted Zixandra, her phosphorescence shifting to interested blue-green. Here's the thing, though, Maya said, beginning to pace. Her movement caused a ripple of tension through the classroom. But she'd learned that sometimes you had to lean into the discomfort to make a point. The cleaner fish evolved from species that were originally the shark's prey. They developed their cleaning behavior as a survival strategy. The shark learned to control its predatory instincts because the benefit was worth it. Your point being? Vexatai asked, though his tone had lost some of its earlier superiority. My point is that you can't separate cooperation from competition. They're not opposites. They're partners. The most stable symbiotic relationships on Earth come from organisms that understand both concepts intimately. Professor Kelthorne's forearms crossed in what Maya had learned was a defensive gesture. Miss Chen, your world's obsession with predation and violence may seem normal to you, but it represents a fundamental failure of evolutionary development. Truly advanced species move beyond such primitive behaviors. Something snapped inside Maya. She'd spent 3 years listening to variations of this lecture. 3 years of being treated like a barely civilized savage who'd somehow learned to use indoor plumbing. 3 years of having her world and her species dismissed as evolutionary failures. Professor, she said, her voice dropping to a tone that made several students lean away from her. Would you like to see what 3 billion years of evolutionary pressure actually looks like? The classroom went dead silent. Professor Kelthorne's compound eyes glittered with what might have been fear or fascination. I beg your pardon? Maya reached into her bag and pulled out her field kit. Standard equipment for xenobiology students, it contained various tools for specimen collection and analysis. She selected a small, curved blade designed for precise dissection work and held it up for the class to see. This is a scalpel, she announced. Extremely sharp, designed for cutting through biological tissue with minimal trauma to surrounding areas. The reaction was immediate and pronounced. Half the class shrank back in their seats, while the other half leaned forward with morbid curiosity. The Altarian's phosphorescence flickered between alarm colors, and the Zephyrian's humming rose to frequencies that made Maya's teeth ache. Miss Chen! Professor Kelthorne's voice cracked with authority. Put that away immediately! Weapons are strictly forbidden in academic settings. Maya looked at the scalpel in her hand, then at the terrified faces around her. A slow smile spread across her face, the kind of expression that her human friends would recognize as mischievous, but which apparently triggered every flight response in the room. This isn't a weapon, Professor. It's a tool, and I'm about to demonstrate the difference. Before anyone could stop her, Maya flipped the scalpel in her hand, caught it by the blade, and offered the handle to Vextai, who happened to be sitting closest to her. Here, she said cheerfully. Take it. Vextai recoiled as if she'd offered him a live grenade. What? Take the scalpel. Go ahead. Miss Chen, Professor Kelthorne's voice held a warning tone. Return to your seat immediately. In a moment. Maya kept the handle extended toward Vextai. I'm making a point about evolutionary development. Take the tool. Vexatai looked around the room for support, found none, and gingerly accepted the scalpel. His 3-fingered hand shook as he held it away from his body like it might explode. Good, Maya said. Now attack me with it. The suggestion caused an immediate uproar. Students began talking at once. Professor Kelthorne started moving toward the emergency communication panel, and somewhere in the back of the room, a Zephyrian began emitting distress frequencies so high-pitched that the lights flickered. "Silence!" Maya's voice cut through the chaos like the crack of a whip. The entire room went quiet so fast that the sudden absence of sound was almost deafening. Maya turned her attention back to Vextai, who was now holding the scalpel like it might bite him. "I said attack me." I can't do that," he stammered. "It's wrong, violent, primitive." "Exactly," Maya said softly. "You've been handed a sharp object, and your first instinct is to avoid using it as a weapon. Do you know why?" "Because violence is wrong," Vextai offered weakly. "No. Because you don't know how." Maya's smile widened, and this time there was definitely something predatory about it. "Your people evolved on a world where the biggest threat was environmental fluctuation. You developed intelligence and cooperation because those traits helped you survive climate change. Violence wasn't necessary, so you never learned it." She gestured to the room at large. "Same with most of your species. The Altarians evolved in ocean environments with abundant resources. The Zephyrians developed on a world with stable geological activity and predictable weather patterns. You all achieved sentience through cooperation because your worlds allowed it." "And your point is?" Professor Keltharn asked, though his tone had shifted from disapproval to reluctant curiosity. Maya turned to face him directly. "My point is that Earth didn't give us that luxury. Every single day for 3 billion years, something on my world was trying to kill everything else. We didn't evolve cooperation instead of competition. We evolved cooperation because of competition." She began walking around the room again, and this time her movement had a different quality. Still predatory, but controlled, purposeful. Like a teacher giving a lecture, except the lesson involved life and death. "You want to know what makes humans different? We're the species that survived, not just survived, thrived. Do you have any idea what the ecosystem of Earth looks like?" "Brutal," offered Zixandra quietly. "The reports we've read suggest extreme predation pressure and environmental instability." "Extreme is an understatement," Maya said. "Earth has survived 5 mass extinction events. 5 times our biosphere was almost completely wiped out. 5 times life clawed its way back from the edge of oblivion and became more complex, more diverse, more resilient." She stopped walking and fixed her gaze on Professor Keltharn. "The last time that happened, it killed off the dominant species and made room for mammals to evolve. Eventually, that led to humans. We're not the product of a peaceful world, Professor. We're the product of a world that tried to kill us for 65 million years and failed." The room was silent, except for the gentle hum of the environmental systems. Maya could see her classmates processing this information, trying to reconcile their image of primitive human brutality with the implications of what she'd just said. "That's why Vextai can't attack me with that scalpel," she continued. "It's not because he's morally superior. It's because he doesn't have the neural pathways for it. His brain literally can't process the concept of using a tool as a weapon because his ancestors never needed that skill." "And you can?" The question came from somewhere in the back of the room, a small, squeaky voice that Maya didn't recognize. Maya's smile returned, and this time it was definitely predatory. "Want to find out?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Professor Keltharn opened his mouth to object, then closed it again. Vextai looked at the scalpel in his hand, as if seeing it for the first time. "Give it back to me," Maya said gently. Vextai practically threw the instrument at her. Maya caught it smoothly, her movement so fluid and natural that several students flinched. She held the scalpel up again, letting the light catch the blade. "This is what evolutionary pressure looks like," she said. And then, faster than most of the room could follow, she spun the scalpel around her fingers like a baton, flipped it into the air, caught it behind her back, and brought it forward to rest gently against her own throat. The class erupted. Students shouted in alarm. Professor Keltharn lunged forward, and the Zephyrian's distress frequencies became so intense that the room's audio dampeners activated automatically. Maya held the position for exactly 3 seconds, then smoothly lowered the blade and set it on the desk beside her. "Relax," she said calmly. "I'm fine." "You could have killed yourself!" Professor Keltharn's voice was high with panic. "No," Maya said matter-of-factly. "I couldn't have. That's the point." She picked up the scalpel again and held it out for the class to see. "This is a precision instrument. I know exactly how sharp it is, exactly how much pressure would be required to break skin, exactly how to hold it to maintain perfect control. I've been using tools like this since I was 12 years old." Maya set the scalpel down and crossed her arms. "Every human child learns to handle sharp objects safely. We learn to judge distance, speed, force, and trajectory by throwing balls at each other. We learn to anticipate movement patterns by playing games where we chase and tag each other. We learn to control our strength by handling fragile objects without breaking them." She gestured to Vextai. "You couldn't attack me with that scalpel, not because you're peaceful, but because you don't have the motor control for it. Your species never developed the neural architecture for precise, rapid movements under stress. You can't throw accurately, you can't judge distance under pressure, and you can't coordinate complex hand movements while adrenaline is flooding your system." "And you can," Professor Keltharn said. It wasn't a question. All humans can. It's not special. It's basic neurology. We had to develop those capabilities because the things hunting us were very good at killing. Maya began pacing again, her movements now clearly deliberate as she demonstrated the fluid, balanced gait that had been setting off alarm bells in her classmates' subconscious. "You see this walk? This is what a persistence predator looks like. Humans evolved to chase prey across long distances. We're not the fastest species on Earth, but we're the most efficient. We can track an animal for days, following it until it collapses from exhaustion." She stopped and faced the class directly. "That's why I make you nervous. It's not because humans are violent. It's because you recognize what we are. Your prey instincts are warning you that you're in the presence of something that evolved to hunt." "But you don't hunt people," Zixandra said, her phosphorescence cycling through confused patterns. "Human civilization is built on cooperation and peaceful exchange." Maya's expression softened. "Of course it is. But here's what you're missing. Our cooperation isn't separate from our hunting instincts. It's built on them." She walked over to the holographic display at the front of the room and began manipulating the controls. A 3-dimensional map of Earth appeared, rotating slowly to show different continents and climate zones. "Humans evolved in Africa, in an ecosystem filled with things that could kill us. Big cats, venomous snakes, disease-carrying insects, larger primates, environmental hazards. We survived because we learned to work together." The display zoomed in to show a grassland environment, but working together didn't mean becoming peaceful herbivores. It meant becoming the most effective pack hunters the world had ever seen. Maya highlighted different regions of the map as she spoke. "We spread across the entire planet in less than 100,000 years. We adapted to every climate, every ecosystem, every environmental challenge Earth could throw at us. We learned to hunt mammoths in the Ice Age, catch fish in tropical rivers, track deer through temperate forests." "And then?" prompted Professor Keltharn, who was now leaning forward with genuine interest. "And then we got good enough at hunting that we ran out of things to hunt. So we invented agriculture, domesticated animals, built cities, developed technology." Maya turned back to the class. "We didn't stop being predators. We just found new challenges to tackle." She gestured to the classroom around them. "This is predatory behavior. Coming to an alien institution to learn about xenobiology? That's a human tracking new prey. Except now the prey is knowledge, and the hunting ground is the galaxy." The room fell silent as the implications of this sank in. Maya could see her classmates looking at her with new understanding. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something that might have been respect. "So when you call humans primitive," Maya continued, "you're missing the point entirely. We're not less evolved than you. We're differently evolved. Your species developed intelligence to cooperate with stable environments. We developed intelligence to dominate unstable ones." She picked up the scalpel one more time and held it casually in her hand. "And that's why this isn't a weapon to me. It's just a tool. The real weapon is up here." She tapped her temple with her free hand. 65 million years of evolutionary pressure created a brain that can turn anything into a weapon if it needs to. But more importantly, it created a brain that knows when not to. Maya set the scalpel down gently and smiled at her classmates, a genuine, warm expression that somehow managed to be more unsettling than her predatory grins had been. The most dangerous thing about humans isn't that we're good at violence. It's that we're good at choosing when to use violence and when not to. We're the species that invented the concept of measured response. Professor Keltharn slowly returned to his position at the front of the class. His forearms moved in what Maya had learned was a gesture of deep consideration among his people. "Miss Chen," he said finally, "I believe I owe you an apology, and perhaps our entire curriculum needs some revision." Maya shrugged. "No apology necessary, Professor, but you might want to update your textbooks. They seem to be missing some important information about evolutionary development." She sat back down in her seat, and for the first time since joining the class, she felt like she belonged there. Around her, her classmates were looking at her with new eyes, still wary, but now with understanding. The lesson was just beginning. Professor Keltharn cleared his throat, a sound that resonated through multiple voice chambers and created an oddly musical tone. "Perhaps, Miss Chen, you would be willing to guest lecture for our next unit on evolutionary adaptation." Maya felt a surge of satisfaction, but before she could respond, an alarm began blaring through the building's communication system. The lights shifted to emergency amber, and Professor Keltharn's skin immediately flushed to deep purple, a color Maya had never seen him display before. "Attention all students and faculty," came an announcement in the precise, emotionless voice of the station's AI. "We are experiencing a Level 3 biological containment breach in Laboratory 7. All personnel are to evacuate to designated safe zones immediately. This is not a drill." The effect on the classroom was immediate and chaotic. Students began pushing toward the exits, their panic responses varying dramatically by species. The Altarians' phosphorescence strobed between terror colors. The Zephyrians emitted frequencies so high they made the walls vibrate. And the Kepler 442b students began secreting stress pheromones that made the air thick and acrid. Maya remained seated, watching the panic with professional interest. She'd seen enough emergency situations during her childhood on Earth to recognize the signs of people who had never experienced real danger before. "Miss Chen," Professor Keltharn called over the chaos, "you need to evacuate." "What's in Laboratory 7?" Maya asked, raising her voice to be heard over the alarm. "Specimens from the Andromeda expedition," the professor replied, trying to herd his students toward the exit. "Some kind of parasitic organism they discovered on Kepler 438b. The containment protocols?" He was interrupted by a new sound, a wet, sliding noise that seemed to be coming from the ventilation system. Several students screamed, and the push toward the exit became more desperate. Maya stood up and walked calmly to the front of the room. "Professor, what exactly are the characteristics of this parasitic organism?" "Miss Chen, this is not the time for academic curiosity." "Actually, it's exactly the time." Maya's voice cut through the panic with startling authority. "If we're dealing with a biological threat, I need to know what we're facing." Professor Kelthorn paused in his evacuation efforts, his compound eyes focusing on Maya with sudden recognition. "You're thinking like a predator again." "I'm thinking like someone who wants to survive. What are the characteristics?" The sliding sound grew louder, and now it was definitely coming from multiple directions. Professor Kelthorn's skin shifted to what Maya now realized was resignation blue. Silicon-based parasitoid, approximately 30 centimeters in length. It seeks out neural tissue in carbon-based life forms and attempts to establish a symbiotic relationship. Define symbiotic. It doesn't kill the host immediately. It influences behavior to ensure its own survival and reproduction. Maya nodded grimly. How does it hunt? Chemical sensors for detecting neural activity. It's blind but can track the electrical patterns of active nervous systems. And Miss Chen? Professor Kelthorn's voice dropped. It's extremely fast once it detects prey. The wet sliding sounds had grown much closer now, and Maya could see something glistening in the air vents near the ceiling. Her classmates were pressed against the exit door, which apparently wouldn't open during the emergency lockdown. "Everyone stop moving," Maya commanded. "What?" Vexatai looked back at her in horror. "Are you insane?" "Stop moving, now!" Maya's voice carried the kind of absolute authority that made people obey without thinking. "Sit down on the floor and try to control your breathing." "Miss Chen," Professor Kelthorn said urgently, "what are you doing?" "It tracks neural activity, right? High stress produces high neural activity. Panic makes you easier to detect." Maya was moving slowly toward her bag, every motion deliberate and controlled. "Everyone needs to calm down, or we're all going to become very intimate with some alien parasites." To their credit, most of her classmates managed to follow instructions. The Altarians dimmed their phosphorescence to barely visible levels, and the Zephyrians reduced their humming to frequencies below the range of hearing. Even Vextai managed to settle into what passed for meditation among his people. Maya reached her bag and carefully extracted several items from her field kit. Not just the scalpel this time, but also a small torch, some sample containers, and what looked like a modified scanner. "Miss Chen," Professor Kelthorn whispered, "what are you planning?" "I'm planning to solve your containment problem." Maya's voice was barely above a whisper, but somehow everyone in the room could hear her clearly. "But I need to know something first. When you say it influences behavior, do you mean it takes complete control?" "Not immediately. The research suggests it begins with subtle modifications to decision-making processes, then gradually assumes more direct neural control over a period of several days." "And during that initial period, the host remains conscious and aware?" "Yes. But Miss Chen, why?" Maya held up a hand for silence. The sliding sound had stopped, which somehow made the situation more terrifying. She could hear her classmates trying to control their breathing, the soft hum of the building's systems, and underneath it all, a faint scratching sound that seemed to be coming from inside the walls. "Because," Maya whispered, "I need to know if I can reason with someone who's been infected." Before anyone could ask what she meant, a section of ceiling tile directly above the classroom bulged downward and fell to the floor with a wet splat. What emerged from the opening made several students whimper in terror despite their efforts to remain calm. The thing was exactly as Professor Kelthorn had described, about 30 centimeters long, silicon-based, and moving with a fluid grace that suggested it wasn't bound by the same physical limitations as carbon-based life. It had no obvious sensory organs, but it moved its front end back and forth like a snake tasting the air. Maya watched it with professional interest. "Chemically guided, responds to electrical activity, silicon-based physiology. Professor, what's its temperature tolerance?" "Miss Chen, be quiet," Professor Kelthorn hissed. The creature's movement pattern changed suddenly. Its head swung directly toward Maya, and even without visible eyes, Its focus was unmistakable. "Too late for quiet," Maya said in a normal voice. "It's already detected me." The thing began moving across the ceiling with horrifying speed, its body rippling in ways that made several students gag. Maya stood perfectly still, watching its approach with the kind of calm attention usually reserved for examining lab specimens. "Miss Chen!" Vextai called out in terror. "Run!" "Can't outrun it," Maya replied conversationally. "Professor, you said it was extremely fast. How fast?" "Faster than any carbon-based organism on record," Professor Kelthorne said weakly. "Miss Chen, please move away from the rest of us." "I'm not moving anywhere." Maya raised her voice so the entire room could hear her. "Everyone stay exactly where you are and keep watching. This is going to be educational." The creature reached the point on the ceiling directly above Maya and paused. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the steady breathing of terrified students and the soft hum of building systems. Then it dropped. Maya moved so fast that most of the room didn't see what happened. One moment, the creature was falling toward her head. The next moment, she was holding it firmly behind its front section, its body writhing frantically in her grip. "Interesting," she said, examining the creature like she was studying a particularly fascinating rock formation. "Silicon-based, but it still follows basic predator-prey dynamics. Fast initial strike, but no contingency plan if the strike fails." The creature was making a high-pitched whining sound and secreting some kind of fluid that hissed when it hit the floor. "Acidic defensive secretion," Maya noted. "Probably evolved to dissolve through containment materials." She shifted her grip slightly, avoiding the secreting areas. "But not particularly effective against something that knows how to handle it." "How did you—" Vextai's voice trailed off in amazement. "Catch it? Reflexes. Every human has them. We have to, or things on Earth would eat us." Maya turned the creature over in her hands, examining its underside with scientific curiosity. "The question is, what do we do with it now?" "Kill it!" several students shouted at once. Maya looked at them with disappointment. "Really? That's your first instinct?" "It's a dangerous parasite," Zixandra protested. "So are half the organisms that make galactic civilization possible," Maya replied. "The bacteria that process waste on station ships, the algae that regulate atmospheric composition, the microorganisms that help with food production. Parasitism is just another survival strategy." She held the creature up so everyone could see it clearly. "Look at it objectively. It's beautiful in its way, perfectly adapted for its ecological niche. Efficient, fast, successful enough to survive transport across interstellar distances." "Miss Chen," Professor Kelthorne said carefully, "I appreciate your scientific perspective, but that organism poses a direct threat to everyone in this room." "Does it?" Maya looked at the creature thoughtfully. "Or does it pose a threat to our preconceptions about biological relationships?" She walked over to one of the empty specimen containers on the lab bench and, with movements so quick and precise that the creature barely had time to react, transferred it into the container and sealed it. "There. Contained, unharmed, available for study." Maya set the container down and looked at her classmates, who were staring at her with expressions ranging from awe to terror. "Problem solved." "How?" The question came from 3 different students simultaneously. Maya shrugged. "Practice. Earth has things that are faster, more venomous, and more aggressive than this little guy. When you grow up dodging everything from venomous spiders to territorial mammals, you develop certain reflexes." She activated her modified scanner and began taking readings from the contained creature. "Plus, I had advantages it wasn't evolved to deal with. It's designed to hunt prey that runs away or freezes in terror. Humans do neither." "What do humans do?" asked a small voice from the back of the room. Maya's smile returned, and this time it was purely predatory. "We hunt back." The creature in the container was now moving in increasingly frantic patterns, apparently trying to escape. Maya watched its movements with scientific interest. "Professor, you mentioned that it influences host behavior gradually. What was the mechanism?" "Chemical modification of neurotransmitter production, according to the preliminary reports. It essentially hijacks the host's reward systems to encourage behaviors that benefit the parasite." "Clever. And the hosts don't realize what's happening because the changes feel natural and rewarding." Maya made some notes on her scanner. "That's actually quite sophisticated. Much more elegant than simple neural control." "Miss Chen," Professor Kelthorne said slowly, "are you actually admiring this thing?" "I'm appreciating it," Maya corrected. "There's a difference. This organism represents millions of years of evolutionary development. It's perfectly adapted to its ecological role. That deserves respect, even if the role is one we don't like." She turned to address the class directly. "This is what I was trying to explain earlier about evolutionary pressure. This creature evolved in an environment where this hunting strategy was successful. It's not evil or malicious. It's just doing what it evolved to do." "But it's dangerous to us," Vextai pointed out. "So are humans, apparently." Maya's smile widened. "But you're all sitting here listening to me instead of running away. Why?" "Because you contained the threat?" "No. Because you're learning to understand it." Maya gestured to the creature, which had now settled into a more passive pattern of movement. "Look at it now. It's not thrashing around trying to escape anymore. It's exploring its new environment, trying to understand the boundaries." She was right. The creature had begun moving in systematic patterns around the container, apparently mapping its new space. It's adapting, learning. That's not the behavior of a mindless parasite. That's the behavior of an intelligent organism trying to survive in a new situation. Professor Kelthorne approached the container cautiously. His forearms moving in gestures Maya had learned indicated deep thought. "You're suggesting that we've been approaching this incorrectly." "I'm suggesting that you've been approaching it like prey." Maya's voice was gentle but firm. "You see something that wants to use you for its own survival, and your instinct is to run or destroy it. But there's a third option, which is negotiation." The suggestion caused another stir among the students, but this time the reaction was more thoughtful than panicked. Maya could see them processing the idea, trying to fit it into their existing frameworks of understanding. "You want to negotiate with a parasite," Zixandra said slowly. "I want to negotiate with an intelligent organism that has evolved a parasitic survival strategy. There's a difference." Maya pointed to the creature, which was now oriented toward the conversation as if listening. "Look at it. It's aware of us, aware of the situation. That's not mindless instinct, that's intelligence." "But how would we even begin to communicate with it?" Maya was already working on her scanner, making modifications to its sensor array. "Same way humans learn to communicate with every other species on this station. We find common ground." She aimed the modified scanner at the creature and activated a series of different sensor modes. The readings that came back made her eyebrows rise. "Professor, take a look at this." Professor Kelthorne approached and examined the scanner's display. His skin immediately shifted to fascinated purple. "Those are complex electrical patterns." "Very complex. This isn't just random neural activity. There are distinct patterns, repetitions, what might be attempts at communication." Maya looked up from the scanner. "I think it's been trying to talk to us." "Talk to us?" Vextai sounded skeptical. "Think about it from its perspective. It's a social organism. Parasites usually are because they need to coordinate with host behavior. It gets transported to a new world, finds itself surrounded by potential hosts that are all displaying high-stress behaviors, and instead of responding normally, one of them captures it and starts examining it." Maya looked at the creature with new understanding. It's probably as confused as we are. She began adjusting settings on her scanner, trying to find a frequency that might allow for communication. After several minutes of experimentation, she found a setting that caused the creature to suddenly become very still. I think I have its attention. Maya began transmitting simple mathematical patterns, basic progressions that any intelligent organism should be able to recognize. The creature responded almost immediately with its own electrical patterns. It's responding, Professor Kelthorne breathed. It's actually responding. Not just responding, Maya said, watching the patterns on her scanner with growing excitement. It's learning our mathematical system and improving on it. The electrical patterns from the creature became more complex, incorporating the mathematical concepts Maya had transmitted, but extending them in ways that suggested advanced understanding. Professor, I think we need to contact the research team, Maya said quietly. This isn't just a parasitic organism. This is a mathematician. The implications of this discovery rippled through the classroom. If the creature was intelligent, then the entire approach to the containment breach needed to be reconsidered. This wasn't just a biological hazard. This was first contact. Miss Chen, Professor Kelthorne said slowly, I think you may have just prevented a diplomatic incident. Maya looked at the creature, which was now generating increasingly sophisticated mathematical patterns. Maybe, but more importantly, I think we're about to make a friend. She began working on more complex communication patterns, trying to establish basic concepts like identity, safety, and mutual benefit. The creature responded eagerly, its electrical patterns becoming more organized and purposeful. You know what the funny thing is? Maya said, not looking up from her work. This might actually be the perfect example of symbiosis that you were lecturing about earlier, Professor. We provide it with a safe environment and intellectual stimulation. It provides us with mathematical insights that could advance our understanding of silicon-based intelligence. And unlike the cleaner fish and shark relationship, added Zixandra, her phosphorescence now cycling through fascinated colors, neither party has to worry about being eaten. Maya grinned, and for the first time since her arrival at the station, it was an expression that made her classmates smile back, rather than cringe in fear. Exactly. Though I think our new friend here would probably have some interesting things to say about predator-prey relationships, too. The creature pulsed with what might have been amusement, and Maya began the delicate process of establishing humanity's first mathematical conversation with a silicon-based intelligence. The lesson in evolutionary biology had become something much more important, a lesson in how different forms of intelligence could find common ground. Outside, the containment alarms continued to blare, but inside the classroom, a new kind of symbiosis was being born. 3 hours later, Maya found herself in the station's main conference room, surrounded by officials, researchers, and administrators. The creature, which had begun responding to the designation axiom after demonstrating its mathematical preferences, was housed in a much larger containment unit that allowed for more complex interactions. Director Thorne, the station's chief administrator, was a centaurian whose crystalline structure reflected her emotional state through subtle color changes. Right now, she was cycling through what Maya had learned were deeply agitated hues. Miss Chen, Director Thorne began, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones typical of her species. While I appreciate your initiative in handling the containment situation, you seem to have created an even more complex problem. How so? Maya asked, though she kept her attention partly focused on Axiom, who was continuing to generate mathematical patterns that seemed to be growing more sophisticated by the hour. We now have what appears to be a sentient alien organism that has expressed, through mathematical communication, a desire to remain on the station. Our xenobiology protocols have no framework for this scenario. Dr. Vashitar, the lead researcher from the Andromeda expedition, gestured with his tentacles in what Maya recognized as extreme frustration. The specimen was collected for study, not for establishing diplomatic relations. We have no idea what its long-term intentions might be. Maya looked up from her communication console. Have you asked it? Asked it? Dr. Vashitar's tentacles curled in confusion. Its long-term intentions. It's been answering mathematical questions for the past 3 hours. I'm pretty sure it would be willing to answer some basic policy questions, too. Miss Chen, Director Thorne's crystalline structure flashed warning colors. You're talking about conducting unauthorized first contact protocols with an organism we know almost nothing about. Actually, Maya said, pulling up her data on the room's main display, we know quite a lot about it now. Axiom has been very cooperative about sharing information. The display filled with complex mathematical equations and data charts. Maya began pointing to different sections as she spoke. Silicon-based intelligence, obviously, but with a distributed processing structure that's unlike anything in our current xenobiology databases. It doesn't have a centralized brain. Its entire body functions as a neural network. That's actually quite fascinating, admitted Dr. Vashitar, his scientific curiosity overriding his administrative concerns. More than fascinating, it's revolutionary. Axiom's thinking patterns operate on multiple parallel tracks simultaneously. It can process mathematical concepts, environmental data, and communication protocols all at the same time without any apparent reduction in efficiency. Maya highlighted a particular section of data. And here's the interesting part. It's not actually parasitic in the traditional sense. The organism's relationship with other life forms is more accurately described as mutualistic. Explain, Director Thorne commanded, her colors shifting to attentive blue-green. Axiom doesn't damage neural tissue when it establishes contact. Instead, it creates supplementary neural pathways that enhance the host's cognitive capabilities. The behavioral changes that were observed in the initial studies weren't the result of parasitic control. They were the result of enhanced intelligence. The room fell silent as the implications of this sank in. Professor Kelthorne, who had been invited to the meeting as a subject matter expert, was the first to speak. You're saying that the organism actually makes its hosts smarter? Significantly smarter. And in exchange, the host provides it with access to new experiences, environments, and learning opportunities. It's symbiosis in the truest sense. Both parties benefit. Dr. Vashitar's tentacles were now writhing with agitation. But the research subjects showed signs of personality changes, altered decision-making patterns, which would be natural consequences of enhanced intelligence, Maya pointed out. When humans develop better cognitive abilities through education or experience, our personalities and decision-making patterns change too. That doesn't mean we're being controlled by our teachers. She turned to address the room directly. The real question isn't whether Axiom is dangerous. It's whether we're smart enough to recognize an opportunity when we see one. What kind of opportunity? Director Thorne asked warily. Maya gestured to the containment unit where Axiom was continuing its mathematical exercises. Axiom has already solved 3 theoretical problems that have been puzzling our mathematics department for the past year. In 3 hours of casual conversation, it's advanced our understanding of multidimensional calculus more than we've managed in the past decade. And what does it want in return? To learn, to experience, to understand how different forms of intelligence develop and interact. Maya's voice took on the tone of someone explaining something obvious to particularly dense students. Axiom is essentially a university student who got lost during a field trip and ended up auditing our classes. A university student that could theoretically take control of any carbon-based organism on the station, Dr. Vashitar pointed out. Maya shrugged. I could theoretically take control of any unarmed opponent on the station, too. That doesn't make me dangerous unless I choose to be. But you're human, Director Thorne protested. We understand human motivations, human psychology. Do you? Maya's smile was sharp. 3 hours ago, half the people in this room thought humans were primitive savages barely capable of civilized behavior. Now you're using human psychology as a baseline for trustworthiness? The point struck home. Maya could see several officials exchanging uncomfortable looks. My point is, Maya continued, that understanding comes from communication and interaction, not from fear and assumptions. We've already learned more about Axiom's species in one afternoon than the research team learned in months of physical examination. But the risks, Dr. Vashatar began. What risks, specifically? Maya's voice took on the patient tone of a teacher walking students through a complex problem. Axiom has been in this room with all of us for 3 hours. It's had multiple opportunities to attempt escape or aggression. Instead, it's been helping us understand quantum mechanics. She activated a new display showing Axiom's recent mathematical contributions. Look at this work. It's not just solving our problems, it's teaching us better ways to think about the problems. This isn't the behavior of something that wants to harm us. Director Thorne's colors shifted through several different patterns before settling on what Maya had learned indicated deep consideration. Assuming you're correct about its motivations, Miss Chen, what exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that we treat Axiom as what it is. A visiting scholar from another species who got caught up in our security protocols by accident. We offer it a formal place in our academic programs, with appropriate accommodations for its unique physiology and needs. A silicon-based alien parasite as a student? Dr. Vashatar's tentacles curled in disbelief. A silicon-based alien mathematician as a student, Maya corrected. One who's already demonstrated abilities that could revolutionize our understanding of advanced mathematics and distributed intelligence. She paused to let this sink in, then played her strongest card. And one who might be willing to help us make contact with its home civilization. That got everyone's attention. Director Thorne's crystalline structure flared with intense light, and Dr. Vashatar's tentacles went completely still. You think it would be willing to serve as a cultural liaison? Professor Kelthorne asked. I think it would be delighted to, Maya replied. Axiom has been asking questions about our social structures, our educational systems, our approach to interspecies cooperation. It's fascinated by the concept of a multi-species academic institution. She gestured to the containment unit. From its perspective, this station represents something its own civilization has never encountered. Dozens of different species working together on intellectual pursuits rather than just survival. That's a revolutionary concept for a species that's apparently spent most of its evolutionary history in symbiotic relationships with single-host species. Director Thorne was quiet for a long moment, her colors cycling through complex patterns that Maya couldn't interpret. Finally, she spoke. Miss Chen, are you volunteering to serve as Axiom's academic sponsor? Maya blinked in surprise. I hadn't thought that far ahead, but yes, I suppose I am. You realize that would make you responsible for its behavior, its academic progress, and its integration into station society? I understand. You also realize that if your assessment of its intentions proves incorrect, you would bear personal responsibility for any consequences? Maya looked at Axiom, who had apparently been following the conversation and was now generating what she'd learned to interpret as eager mathematical expressions. Director, 3 hours ago my classmates were afraid of me because they thought humans were dangerous predators. Now they're sitting in the same room as a silicon-based alien and treating it like a fascinating research opportunity. Sometimes the best way to deal with dangerous unknowns is to get to know them better. She turned back to Director Thorne. I'll take responsibility for Axiom's integration, but I want something in return, which is, I want the Xenobiology Department to revise its curriculum to include practical interspecies contact protocols. Not just theory, but hands-on training in communication, cultural assessment, and conflict resolution. Maya gestured to the room at large. Today proved that our current approach to alien contact is completely inadequate. We need to train students, all students, not just humans, to handle situations like this with curiosity and intelligence instead of panic and prejudice. Professor Kelthorne's skin shifted to enthusiastic green. Miss Chen, that's an excellent proposal. I would be very interested in collaborating on such a curriculum. Director Thorne's colors had settled into what Maya hoped was approval. Very well. Axiom will be granted provisional student status, with you as its academic sponsor. Professor Kelthorne, you'll work with Miss Chen to develop the new curriculum she's proposed. And Axiom's living arrangements? Maya asked. We'll provide appropriate facilities, though I suspect it might prefer to remain close to its sponsor. Maya looked at Axiom, who pulsed with what she'd learned to recognize as agreement. Actually, I think I'd like that too. It'll be interesting to see what we can learn from each other. Dr. Vashtar's tentacles writhed one final time. And if this experiment goes wrong? Then we'll deal with it, Maya said simply. The same way humans have always dealt with new challenges, by adapting, learning, and finding ways to turn potential threats into advantages. She walked over to Axiom's containment unit and began entering the release codes. But I don't think it will go wrong. I think it's going to be the beginning of something incredible. As the containment field deactivated, Axiom flowed out of the unit with fluid grace and immediately oriented toward Maya. For a moment, it remained perfectly still, as if waiting for permission or instruction. Maya knelt down and extended her hand toward the creature, palm up. Hey there, roommate. Ready to get started? Axiom approached cautiously, then gently made contact with Maya's hand. The moment their skin touched, Maya felt a subtle tingling sensation. And suddenly, mathematical concepts began flowing through her mind with crystal clarity. Whoa, she breathed, sitting back on her heels. That's amazing. Miss Chen? Director Thorne's voice was sharp with concern. Are you all right? Maya looked up with an expression of wonder. I'm fine, better than fine. Axiom just showed me how to solve differential equations using geometrical visualization. It's like having a mathematical tutor directly connected to my brain. And you're still... You? Maya laughed, and the sound was purely human. Completely me. Just me with access to some really impressive mathematical insights. This isn't control or parasitism. It's collaboration. She stood up, with Axiom flowing alongside her in a pattern that suggested companionship rather than dominance. Director, I think you're going to be very impressed with what we can accomplish together. I hope you're right, Miss Chen. Maya grinned, and this time her predatory smile was matched by Axiom's own version of mathematical enthusiasm. Trust me, when a Deathworld predator and a silicon-based mathematician decide to work together, interesting things happen. As they left the conference room, Maya could hear Director Thorne behind them, already making arrangements for the new curriculum and discussing the implications of having the galaxy's first official human-silicon symbiotic student partnership. The lesson that had started with a scalpel and a challenge to assumptions about evolutionary development had become something none of them could have predicted. Maya and Axiom walked down the corridor together, already beginning their next mathematical conversation, while behind them the foundation of interspecies education shifted to accommodate new possibilities. In the end, Maya reflected, the most important lesson hadn't been about predators or prey, symbiosis or parasitism. It had been about the power of choosing curiosity over fear, understanding over assumptions, and collaboration over conflict. The galaxy was about to get a lot more interesting.